Hi, welcome back. I'm Dr. Robert Yilding with the National Social Anxiety Center in Newport Beach, California. This is the second of 3 videos on how to implement what's called a behavioral experiment and how that can help you manage and overcome your social anxiety. In the previous video, I discussed what a behavioral experiment is and gave an overview of the steps involved. Today, we're going to take a closer look at these steps by learning how to use an effective behavioral experiment worksheet, such as one of these. As you can see, the first column asks us to identify and write down which anxiety-driven assumption we want to test out. Remember, these typically take the form of if-then statements and become activated in moments when our social anxiety starts to spike. I previously gave an example of, if I share which music I truly like with others, they will judge me. In addition, it wouldn't be uncommon to have some quote-unquote safety behaviors around this assumption, such as vetting out which music the person I'm talking to likes before I disclose anything about myself, or altering my response to music I perceive to be more mainstream or common than my true preference is, or perhaps mentally scripting what I will say in advance in case I'm asked a question like this. Any of these behaviors could be great opportunities for a behavioral experiment by seeing what happens when I summon the courage to drop or alter them. For this experiment, I'm going to be testing out the assumption that if I share which music I like without vetting out what the other person likes first, I'll be judged or made fun of for it. So I'm going to write that assumption down here. Okay, now in the second column, I'm going to write down what my specific actionable experiment is and how this experiment is going to test out the original assumption. For example, this week I'm going to initiate sharing a song I like with 3 acquaintances without waiting to find out what music they enjoy. So I'm dropping the safety behavior of vetting out their interests first for assurance. And I'm summoning the courage to put the assumption to the test that I'm going to be judged for it. Okay, next, in order to increase the chances that this will be a productive experiment, I want to write down any possible problems that might arise in completing the experiment and how I'm going to cope with or troubleshoot these challenges. As an example, a challenge that might arise is that I'll start to feel really anxious and my body will start to feel shaky and flush, which might prevent me from completing my goal of sharing the song I like. In the next column, to have a plan to cope with this, I'm going to write down to remember to refocus my attention on the person I'm talking to versus focusing on how I'm feeling, and to remind myself that this is a great opportunity for growth no matter what happens. From here, it's time to dive in, complete my experiment, and gather some new information for myself. Okay, now let's say I've gone out and completed my goal of sharing a song I like with 3 different people. The results, which I'll write down in the next column here, were 1. Taking the initiative sharing was pretty difficult at first, but got easier each time I practiced it. 2 people surprisingly also liked the song I mentioned, which led to us discussing other songs. And 3, one person didn't know the song I mentioned, but asked me more about it, and we talked for a bit after. Next, based on these new results, what can I learn and take away from it? Well, one takeaway might be that more people than I thought like the same music that I do. And another one is that even though not everyone knows or appreciates the music I like, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be judged for it or things will go bad. As you can see, the behavioral experiment worksheet is an empirical and step-by-step strategy that helped move me in the direction of facing my fear by initiating sharing my music with others. Lastly, based on the amazing learning opportunity this created, I now have some new data that I can help develop new ways of thinking about similar situations. For example, I might put in the last column a new assumption that says something like, if I share what I really like with others, I generally find more connections and feel better about myself at the end of the day. In summary, today we reviewed the steps of setting up a behavioral experiment and began to understand it as a way of testing out and modifying certain thought patterns which maintain high levels of social anxiety and avoidance. So now that you have all the steps you need, I'm sure you're starting to think about all the different social situations and potential experiments that might be helpful for you. And you might be wondering, where do I start? Next, in the third and final video, I'll go over an efficient way to organize and approach your various experiments to have a path towards progress moving forward.